I'd like to tell you the story of Robin. The story begins when she was about 14 years old. And as I tell you about her, I'd like you to think back to when you were 14. Is it long? I'll give you a minute. Okay. So what were you like? What were your interests? And compared to now, what did you really know about yourself? Well, when Robin was 14, she was interested in all things friends and church. This is the time that Robin began to get really interested in her lip gloss and her hairstyle and trying to get her mom to install a phone line in her bedroom. Think before cell phones, right? She was about to begin high school and needed to appear mature. One of the places she was able to test her maturity was at church, because there she could see if the young men liked her, and that would show that she at least appeared mature. So one day, as she and her friends were working on their plans for after church, going to the mall to see some of these boys, one of the church's pastors approached them and complimented their choir performance and asked if they had enough money to pay for their Sunday meal. So each child shook their head no, and he handed out $20 bills to each of the 4 girls. He told Robin to make sure she took good care of herself and the other girls. See, Robin was a little bit older. She was about 18 months older than the other girls, about 4 inches taller, which is a lot for a girl, right? And by comparison to the other girls, she was the poorest. So she felt very good about this responsibility that she was given by the pastor. She knew that it was a regular occurrence for the other girls to be handed money by their parents whenever they needed something, but she had to work really hard using her summer funds to pay for any extras that she needed. So this pastor, who approached the group, we'll call him Minister Don, began to regularly stop by the group on Sundays. He playfully chastised them, encouraged them, and many times financed their Sunday dinners. Eventually, he would seek Robin out alone to offer to pay for her dinner. She felt very cared for, and she was glad to know that Minister Don worried about her so much. And since Robin's mom also attended the church, sometimes Minister Don would talk to the mom and tell her how wonderful Robin was and what a great job the mom was doing with her. It all felt very endearing. This care continued during various church services and church events up until the age of 16 for Robin, to where Minister Don told her she needed to start thinking about how to support herself as she became an older woman. So he recommended that she work in the church office where he worked, and he got her a job there. She started working there about 3 days a week with contributions and filing and any other odd ends that needed to be done. Eventually, Minister Don said that she needed to be his personal assistant. And being his personal assistant would mean that she would be in more contact with him on the phone and in person. When Robin was 17, Minister Don said that she needed a company vehicle. She was happy to oblige, and she took this vehicle. The first time that Robin kissed Minister Don, it was on his cheek. She and another girl that worked in the office were told by him to give him a kiss, so they did. I mean, they were teenage girls. They just kissed a very handsome, prestigious pastor in the church, so it was something to giggle about. I mean, Robin felt a little weird about it, but he was older. He was 20 years older. He was married. It was no big deal. The first time that Robin had sex with Minister Don was when she was 18. And it was the first time she had sex with anyone. And it was okay, he told her, because he loved her. He didn't love his wife, and they were adults. So although their affair continued, Robin often mentioned the guilt she felt about committing adultery and asked if their relationship status would ever change. He told her, God's a forgiving God. And I can't leave my wife because it wouldn't reflect well on the church. He said he would take care of her, and he did. He bought her first car. He gave her money whenever they were together. He got her a raise at work. And when they talked on the phone, he told her how wonderful she was, how mature she was, how special she was. When their affair ended, it was only because of Robin. It was because she no longer wanted to be a secret, and she wanted to be able to share with her friends this relationship that she was in. And of course, because she was raised as a good Christian girl, and so she felt constantly guilty. Unfortunately, Robin's story is a true one. Her story is a compilation of the stories I've heard from my friends, from my colleagues, from parents, from my clients, and even parts of my own story. Her story resonates with me in sexual misconduct by a trusted, admired, handsome, wealthy Christian man who held office in the church that I grew up in. And I mention all of those points and those attributes because there is a power discrepancy in that man and a teenage girl that I want you guys to take note of. So if you remember, Robin was 14 when this began, and she wanted to impress the boys, right? So some people may think that she holds fault that he actually admired her. You may think that technically they did nothing wrong because they were adults and they were 18. I know that some people may think that because in these situations, many do. The victim ends up bearing the guilt and shame for sleeping with a married man, for losing her virginity before marriage, for having such low self-esteem. I mean, why couldn't you just say no? Remember that power imbalance, though. It applies here. And this is where I'd like to step in and offer a therapeutic view. There is a method of therapy called restoration therapy. It seeks to restore love and trustworthiness. And so in this story, we would want to restore Robin's love of herself and her trust of spiritual leaders. So let's start with love. Love is essential because it informs individual identity. Everything about yourself is based on the way that you were loved and cared for. And we don't enter into the world with the ability to love. We enter in with the need to be loved. Then there's trustworthiness, which becomes essential because it informs individuals about the safety of relationships. Is my trust in you, is it safe? So in Robin's story, entering her teenage years, she was loved. She felt safe in her family, her friends, her budding romantic relationships. But right at that age, where all of our self-love is being realized, we're trying to figure out if we love ourselves and what we like about ourselves, Minister Don introduced a perverted romantic love. This love would eventually violate her trust that the church and its leaders is safe. Robin's story here ended with the ending of her affair. But can you imagine how she now views churches, ministers, or men? So let's continue her story. If she were to begin her journey of healing right now, she would realize that she holds herself most responsible for what happened. The problem is that she finds herself in bad relationship patterns, or what restoration therapy calls a pain cycle. And so this is how a pain cycle looks. At the top is how a person feels about themselves. And because of that feeling that they have about themselves, it goes into how a person behaves. And then that leads into how others react to you, which leads back into how you feel about yourself. Okay, so if we identify Robin's pain cycle, it might look like this. An unconscious, so she's not aware of this feeling, right? Consistent feeling of being devalued. That's what's at the top for her. So with Minister Don, she realizes as she's doing her work, he didn't value her. She didn't value herself. And now she has a sneaking suspicion that others don't value her. She might cope with this feeling by behaving arrogantly, right? That inflated sense of self, it kind of makes up for that perceived deficit. In relationships, she chooses men who are at or below her level of intelligence, her attractiveness, her prestige, so that she can be admired, or as she experiences, valued. Unfortunately, her partners in relationships don't react well to her arrogance. That's the reaction that others give, and that sends her right back to the top of her pain cycle, and she again feels devalued. In order to get out of her pain cycle, Robin needs to discover her truth. She needs to refrain from running away from her pain and begin to move purposefully towards her value. So let me give you an example of how damaging running away from pain can be. If an animal is running after you, what do? You run. Where do you run? You run to wherever it's going to be some protection, right? So you might run into a bush, or you might jump a fence, or you might run into a building. In this situation, though, we go where we need to protect ourselves, but we don't know what lies in the protection that we chose. That bush could be poisonous. That fence could be keeping you away from hazardous materials, and there could be more danger, more people, more animals inside of this building that you run into. So you ran away from your fear of pain into an unknown, possibly more dangerous situation. So moving back to restoration therapy, Robin has the option to stop just running away from the pain she's experiencing and begin to purposely choose what's next. She can move out of her pain cycle through a realization of truth into a peace cycle. In her truth phase, Robin would discover how fear of pain has informed her current behaviors. She behaves in ways that are simply gut reactions to pain, actual pain, or anticipated pain. What if she can discover who she was before she knew fear of this pain? Before violations of love and trust? What if she can be restored to that truth of who she is? If she could, she would move towards her peace cycle, and she would choose new behaviors based on a restored view of herself. So, in her new cycle, this begins with how she understands and sees her value. That's at the top. So now she would behave as if she's valuable, which would cause others to react to her as if she's valuable, which would reiterate her value in herself, and she sees and understands that she's valuable. So you've all heard Robin's story, and you've walked with her through her pain. And I'm sure that all of us whose stories, our own stories, might be represented in small ways in Robin's pain, prays that she would find peace. So I'm going to present that challenge to us all. I want you to rediscover your value. Receive that value and live your life as if you're valuable. You arrive on this earth with value. And no matter the pain that you felt because of any abuses that you've suffered, there's no one that can take away your value. There's no one that can decrease your value because it's yours. As you choose to seek your peace, you can be restored back to you. Thank you.